I want to talk a little bit more about this heavier thread that I discussed a little bit when I was talking about needles and threads. And this type of thread is just beautiful when it's done, but the problem with it is it's very thick and it can't go through all of the tension bars in your sewing machine, on the top of your sewing machine. So it's best put in the bobbin and turn your quilt upside down and quilt it that way. And it's just so much fun to quilt it and then turn your quilt over and voila, you have this beautiful thread. So I have wound this thread on my bobbin. And then this is the back of my little quilt sample. So you see the front is pieced, and then I've put my quilting paper on the back of the quilt. I have just regular thin cotton thread on the top of my machine, and I have the really beautiful thicker thread in the bobbin. And you just quilt exactly the same way, just a little bit upside down. So it's not anything to be afraid of, and it's another option that gives you something really fun. And pull that bobbin thread through. It's a little bit thicker, so it might be a little bit more challenging to get it through your fabric, but it does come through, and don't be afraid of it. And then I'm just going to stitch on my paper like I would doing any other design. And it's exactly the same. You do want to test on a sample quilt first to make sure that your tension's good and all of that, because it does change your tension just slightly. I had to tighten my top tension a little bit to get it quite right this time. But it just depends on what you've done prior to this. And so I'm just stitching it exactly the same way as I would anything else that I have done prior to this, and clipping my threads. And so that part of it does not change. The only thing I'm doing different is stitching from the back and not from the front. So you get an idea. I'm doing nothing different than what I've done in other projects that I've been working on. And then here is one that's finished. So I've quilted completely from the back, and then when you turn it over, you have this beautiful thread in that design on the front. And it's just so much fun to turn it over and have the big reveal at the end. So this thread is nothing to be afraid of, and it can really add a lot of punch to a quilt. Here's another situation where you might want to quilt from the back. In this situation, the reason I wanted to quilt from the back was not because of the thread, but because of the pattern of the fabric on the back of the quilt. This quilt, I put a wonderful batik fabric on the back that has this leaf pattern. And I wanted to stitch around the leaves, and I have a very simple patchwork design on the front, and I wanted the quilting part to be the most important part of this quilt. And so I stitched around the leaves from the back, and I think it's a 12 weight thread in the bobbin, and made that be my focal point of the front of the quilt. So here's the back of the quilt, and then the front of the quilt has these beautiful leaves quilted exactly like this back fabric. So that's another situation where you might want to quilt from the opposite side, and it gives you a lot more options of things you can do.